What happens when a girl from a dysfunctional family decides to bring tea to a silent old man? Her mother panics, the neighbors are afraid, and the next morning, soldiers are standing at the gate. What happens next turns the whole street upside down, and her idea of what is good. He woke up early. Not because he wanted to, it was just a habit. There was something about him that reminded me of an old dog. His gaze was always alert, his movements slightly hidden. Garrett lived alone. His house stood at the end of the street, where the asphalt gave way to loose earth and the streetlights were on their last legs, creaking rustily. The house was wooden, gray, with a peeling porch and a broken mailbox that no one ever used. The kitchen smelled of stale bread and sour rags. The table was covered with oilcloth with faded flowers. On the windowsill was a jar of sprouting onions. And the window, the most important thing. Through it, he looked at the street as if it were a silent movie that no one was going to watch. Garrett didn't talk to his neighbors, not because he was rude. He just didn't see the point. People asked questions out of habit, not out of interest. And he was tired of being that old man from the house with the blackened facade. He rarely went out during the day, sometimes to fix the porch, sometimes to take out the trash. He didn't have any pets. He didn't watch TV. He didn't answer the phone. There was a phone in the house with the cord cut off. It just stood there. For show. Garrett did everything for appearances. Even when he made himself coffee, he drank it not because he wanted to, but because that's what normal people do. Sometimes he would sit on the steps and silently watch the school children passing by. Among them was a girl. She was thin, with a messy pigtail and a worn backpack. She walked with dragging feet and always looked back, not out of fear, out of some childish wariness, as if she sensed that behind those curtains was someone who had been silent for a long time. Once she stopped. It was cool. Steam rose from his mouth. The girl took off her backpack, took something out, and walked over to him. "For you, tea," she said, hesitantly holding out the thermos. "We have some left over at school." He stared, motionless. His eyes were dry, as if they hadn't had any moisture in years. "Just tea," she repeated, placing the thermos on the step. She left quickly. She didn't look back. And he sat there, motionless, until the steam from the lid dissipated into the air. Only then, quietly, as if afraid of himself, did he reach out and open the lid. He didn't sleep that night. He left the window ajar. The room was cold, but he didn't close it, as if he was afraid that if he did, she wouldn't come back. The tea was sweet, too sweet. But there was something honest about it, like a child's card with crooked letters, not just for show, but from the heart. He took 2 sips, then another. He sat for a long time with the thermos in his hands, as if he were holding someone's palm rather than a container. Then he put it on the windowsill. He watched as the condensation dripped down, drop by drop. The next day, the girl was walking down the street again. But this time, she didn't slow down. She just glanced briefly and disappeared around the corner. He left later. He sat down as usual. He waited. But the thermos was gone. And there was no smell of sweet tea. He even got angry. At himself. At her. At himself for thinking that it would become a habit. Nothing should become a habit. Especially kindness. Kindness is like a bonfire. Once it goes out, it's gone. The next day she came back. She silently put down the thermos. There was no sugar inside, just black tea, bitter, just the way he liked it. "I'm sorry, my mom said no sweets," she muttered, barely looking up. He nodded. Once. That was enough. Because it wasn't just a gesture. It was, "I understand." "Do you go to school?" She nodded. "Uh-huh. For now." "Is it hard?" She shrugged. Then she sat down next to him, on the edge of the step. She tucked her hands into her sleeves. The wind blew. And the silence between them was not frightening, but almost cozy. "It's strange here," she said. "No flowers, no sounds. Just you and this porch." He smiled. It's noisy inside me. Outside, I like it quiet. Did you come up with that? No. I stole it from someone. I haven't said anything of my own in a long time. She fell silent. Then she stood up and dusted herself off. I'll come back, if I can. He didn't answer, but he didn't turn away either. When she left, he went inside. For the first time in a long time, he opened the chest of drawers where things he hadn't touched in years lay. There were old letters. One of them was written in a child's handwriting, a yellowed sheet of paper. Dad, will you come to the play? He clenched the letter as if he wanted to crumple it, but couldn't. He left it on the table. He walked away. He sat down in a chair. He didn't fall asleep right away, but for the first time, he didn't have nightmares. And in the morning, he waited again. Not for the girl, himself. Her name was Mia. He found out by accident when she dropped her school ID in her hurry to leave. The ID was colorful, with glitter and a poorly cut photo. He held it in his hand for a long time before placing it on the railing where she could find it. Since then, it was as if a thin thread had formed between them. Not friendship, not family. Something else. Something you don't explain with words so as not to destroy it. He didn't ask questions. She didn't explain. She just came. Sometimes with a thermos, sometimes with a sandwich, sometimes just with herself. He started drinking tea again. Not because he wanted to drink, but because it had become a ritual. And rituals are what keep us going when everything else falls apart. We have a new guy at school, she said one day. The principal, he's tough. He threatens to put things in our personal files, as if our personal files were something serious. He smiled. For the first time it was real, a short, dry laugh that made her lips crack. You're an adult, you understand? And you, how old are you? He didn't answer right away. He picked up the thermos and turned it in his hands. Old enough to know that no one wants answers. People ask questions, but they only listen to themselves. Mia was silent for a long time. Then she exhaled. My mom says you're dangerous. That your house burned down. That you lived in some kind of department. That people in uniform came to see you. Is that true? He froze. Slowly, he put down the thermos. Your mom cares about you. That's normal. But you didn't answer. Why would you want to know? I don't know. I just want to understand. He looked at her, truly for the first time, not with the gaze of an old man accustomed to loneliness, but as if he saw before him not a child, but someone who could hear him. But even then, he didn't say a word. He stood up, slowly, as if he didn't want to leave but couldn't stay any longer. That's enough for today. She left, hunched over, not hurt, just lost. And he watched her go, feeling something fragile, barely discernible, already cracking. That evening he didn't turn on the light again, and again he took that box out of the dresser. At the bottom were photos, official ones, black and white. One picture showed him with young, smiling men in camouflage. Another showed him standing alone, against a blank wall. No words, no flag, no insignia. He stared at it as if waiting for one of the men in the photos to speak. Then, with a loud crash, he threw the box against the wall. Papers flew everywhere. He sat down on the floor. He grabbed his head. And for the first time in many years, he said aloud, I tried. God, I tried. On the third day, she didn't come. He waited. He sat by the window as usual, with his legs tucked under him and a blanket over his knees, as if that could warm anything inside him. The thermos stood nearby, empty. Even the lid was still there, which he now twirled in his hands like a dice, as if its roll would determine whether she would come or not. In the evening, someone knocked on the door. He tensed up. Rarely did anyone come to visit him, unless it was someone who had the wrong address, or children checking out the creepy old man on a dare. He opened the door slowly, hesitating. A woman stood on the threshold. She was about 40, with dark circles under her eyes, her hands in her zipped jacket, and a tired, burnt voice. "Are you Garrett?" He nodded. "You met my daughter." He was silent. "Her name is Mia, 6th grade. She came to your house, brought you some tea. She talked to you." He nodded again, cautiously, as if every movement was a step on thin ice. The woman approached him. She spoke quietly, but there was tension in her voice, like a taut rope. "I don't know what you said to her, but she hasn't spoken for 3 days. She just sits and stares at the wall. And yesterday I found this in her backpack." She took out a piece of paper. It was that photo, the man in uniform, with the caption, "Sometimes it's better to be silent than to live a lie." "Is this yours?" "No," he replied. "It's hers now. I don't know what you see in her. Maybe you're just bored. Maybe you wanted to play dad. But she has a family. She has me. And you have no right. Do you understand?" He nodded. He didn't interrupt once. "And another thing," she added as she was leaving, "if she ever comes near you again, I'll call someone. Believe me, I'll find someone to complain to. People like you don't get away with this." She left without looking back. He remained standing in the doorway, leaning against the doorframe. He didn't close the door, let the wind blow in if it wanted to. He didn't go to bed that night. He just sat on a chair, looked at the clock, and drank water. The water was warm. It had been there since morning. But he drank it, mechanically, as if it reminded him that he was still alive. The next day, the girl came after all, late, right after school. Her eyes were red and she was holding an empty thermos. "My mom said you're manipulating me." He was silent. "Is it true? Are you playing games?" He looked at her for a long time. "No," he said. "I just listened." "That's all? Did you want more?" She didn't answer. She put down the thermos. She walked away. And then suddenly, as if she had broken free, "I don't know who you are, and I don't care, it's just—" "When I sit here, it's easier." He nodded. "Then stay. Just don't leave any trash." She grunted. For the first time in a week. "You're strange." "So are you." From that moment on, something changed. An invisible line had been crossed. But already beyond the horizon, beyond the limits of their conversation, the name Garrett flashed again in someone's memory. And it was no longer forgotten. When things happen, they don't warn you. There's no siren, no sign saying, "Attention, something's about to happen." Everything happens quietly, as if by itself. It was a normal evening. Garrett was sitting on the porch, as always, with a blanket over his knees. He was starting to feel cold more often. His bones were talking to the weather. Mia arrived a little later than usual. Without a thermos, without a backpack. Just herself, and with a kind of slow shadow in her movements. She sat down next to him, on the same step where their silence had already left its mark. They sat in silence. They didn't even need tea. "Did you have children?" she asked suddenly. He exhaled. Not as an answer, just exhaled. "I did. A daughter." "Don't ask." "Okay." 10 minutes passed, or an eternity. He suddenly spoke. "Her name was Sarah. She sang." She always sang. Even when she played hide-and-seek, she hummed to herself. I didn't know how hard it would be to live without that sound. Mia nodded without looking. "And then?" she asked finally. "And then, there was one day, one phone call, one order, and since then, neither her nor her voice. Only an echo." Mia slowly put her hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. "Mom thinks I'm sick." "I'm just tired of being alone when there are adults around who can't hear me." He looked at her. "You're not alone." Are you? Me? I'm just a remnant. Pain that wasn't removed in time. Mia smiled quietly. A tear rolled down her cheek and she didn't wipe it away. Meanwhile, a few streets away, at the post office, a local employee named Cheryl was studying a list of recipients who hadn't picked up their mail in a long time. One envelope, with no return address, had been sitting there for several years. It had a name on it, Garrett S.L., and in one of the centers where doors open with the touch of a palm and cameras flash even in the dark, a notification sounded. Someone looked at the monitor, read it, then picked up the phone. He's shown up. Address confirmed. That same night, Garrett woke up to a bright light. At first, he thought it was the porch light. But no. A beam flashed outside the window. Then there was movement. He got up carefully, silently, as he was accustomed to doing. He approached the door. He opened the curtain slightly, and he saw it. A black car. No license plate. It was parked at the curb. The headlights were off. A man got out. He stood there as if he were just smoking, but he didn't have a cigarette. He was just waiting. Garrett didn't move, only in his chest, a dull, heavy blow, an old rhythm. His heart remembered what fear was. Real fear. The kind that doesn't come from outside but from inside, like cold metal under your ribs. He didn't go to the door. He just went back to his chair, sat down, leaned forward, and began to breathe slowly. In through his nose, out through his mouth, just like he had been taught. Just like he had survived those nights when everything around him was on fire and inside, he was quieter than a grave. In the morning, the car was gone, as if it had never been there. But the tire tracks remained. Mia saw them first. "Did you have visitors?" she asked when she sat down on the porch. He looked at her, slowly, as if deciding whether to lie or not. "No, just someone passing by." She nodded, but she didn't believe him. It was obvious. She began to bring him questions instead of tea more and more often. Not childish questions, the kind that don't always have answers. "Were you hiding?" she asked once. He didn't understand. "Well, not in the basement. In general. It happens, doesn't it, that a person lives, but in reality they're hiding?" He smiled, weakly. "I wasn't hiding. I just fell silent." "Why?" He fell silent. He thought. Then he said, "Because when you speak, you may not be heard. But when you're silent, at least you're not betrayed." She froze. Then she suddenly stood up. "I'll come back tomorrow." He nodded. The next morning she didn't come. Others came. Soldiers, not like in the movies, no bulletproof vests. No loud orders, just 3 of them, in black. One was younger, another had a tired face and wrinkles on his forehead. The third was in uniform without insignia. They stood at the gate. They didn't come in. They just waited. He came out. Without a jacket. Slowly, as if for the last time. "Mr. Larson?" asked the senior officer. "No," replied Garrett. "Not anymore. We're not here to question you." "Then why are you here?" A reminder. They looked at him for a long time. Not threateningly, more respectfully, like looking at a faded sign that says, "Something was here." "You have a daughter," said the younger one. "6th grade, Mia. We know." "Don't be afraid. We're not after her. We're here because of you." "What do you want?" The older one took out a small envelope. It was worn but clean. "This was left behind. It came through internal channels. The check was canceled. The request was closed. But you deserve to know." He took the envelope. Without opening it, he clenched it in his fist. "Is she alive?" No one answered. They just looked away. And he understood. No. The soldiers turned and left, without a word. without documents, without a trace. And everything was quiet again. He opened the envelope when the sun was already setting. Inside was a child's drawing. Colored pencil, a house, a cloud, a man with his hand raised, and the caption, "Dad, I'm waiting." He stared at it for a long time. Then he just sat down on the steps and closed his eyes. And that evening, for the first time, he didn't wait for Mia to come home. Because everything inside him was silent, the way only someone who has waited for their silence can be silent. Mia sat in her room with the curtains drawn. There was a thermos on the table. It was empty, but she left it there anyway, as if it kept her mind in order. Her mind was noisy, like the subway at rush hour. Thoughts ran back and forth, collided, fell. Her mother walked around the apartment heavily as if on boards that were about to crack. She smoked by the window, although she had never allowed herself to do so even on the balcony before. "Did he say anything to you?" she asked for the third day in a row. "Anything strange? Anything about people, about danger?" "No," Mia replied. "Then why are you crying at night?" She didn't answer. She didn't look her mother in the eyes. Her mother exhaled, rubbing her forehead in confusion. "Mia, he's not your friend. He's an old man with a difficult past. He was interrogated. His house burned down. Do you think these are just coincidences? You're a child. You don't have to carry all this on your shoulders." "I'm not," Mia said quietly. "I just don't want him to disappear." Her mother stood up, clenching her hands into fists. "You have to take care of yourself. Do you understand? People disappear. People break. We can't put them all back together again. What if we can? Then we break." It wasn't an argument, it was a stalemate. One stubborn in her childish, "I believe." The other broken in her adult, "It's too late." The next morning, Mia left early. No backpack. Empty thermos. The street was gray, like wet cotton wool. The rain was just starting, the kind that builds up slowly and then pours all day. When she approached Garrett's house, her heart sank. The gate was open. That wasn't like him. He usually locked it. Not because he was afraid, just because everything in his life was reserved, even the little things. She stepped into the yard. The porch was empty. The door was ajar. She froze. Then she climbed the steps. "Garrett?" she called softly. "It's me, Mia." There was no answer. It was dark inside. It smelled like a closed basement, damp, dusty, and old books. She went in. She looked around. The house seemed alive, but lifeless, like a person who was no longer breathing but not yet dead. There was a drawing on the table, the same one, the house, the man, the signature. She didn't touch it. She just looked at it. And then she heard the floor creak. She turned around, and she saw him. He was standing by the window, with his back to her, in uniform, the same one he kept at the bottom of the dresser. His back was straight, a silent silhouette. He knew she was there, but he didn't turn around. "Garrett?" He didn't answer. He just raised his hand, palm up, just like in the drawing. And in that silence, she suddenly realized he couldn't speak anymore. Not because he wasn't allowed to, but because everything had already been said. She didn't call him again. She just sat down against the wall, tucking her legs under her. It was quiet. Not a deathly silence, but an autumn silence, with wind, drafts, and raindrops tapping on the windowsill. A silence in which one could live a lifetime without saying a word. He never turned around. At some point, she got up. She took the thermos. She walked over to him. She held it out carefully. "I don't know who you are. And I don't know if you were a bad person. But I know for sure that the worst thing is when everyone is silent and you want to say something, just so someone will hear you." He nodded, slightly, barely noticeable. Then he took the thermos, hesitantly, as if it might burn him. "Thank you," he breathed. It was a word he rarely used, genuine, without embellishment, as if it were too precious to waste. She left, without saying goodbye, because there was no ending between them. Only footsteps, and step by step, a strange truth that adults couldn't explain. In the evening, they came again, the same soldiers, the same three. Only this time they had papers, and their faces were gray. One of them's fingers were shaking. They entered the house without knocking. He was sitting by the window, in the same uniform. He didn't get up. He wasn't surprised. "You knew we weren't supposed to touch you," said the senior officer. "You came here yourselves," replied Garrett. "I didn't call you." "But you opened the door." "Only for myself." They didn't threaten him. They asked, dryly in their own way. They gave him a piece of paper, one of those where the words are small but the meaning is huge. "It's an order. You're being summoned to Washington, unofficially. It's connected with that operation." He didn't look at the sheet. He just raised his eyes. "Everything there was burned. Everyone who could talk is dead. Only ashes remain. But some have surfaced, and if you don't go, more will surface." He nodded. He didn't give up. He was just tired. "I have 1 week left. I can't promise more." They accepted it as a sentence. They left. The wind slammed the door. Mia saw their car as she walked home. She hid around the corner. She wasn't scared. She just understood that everything had changed. Her mother was already waiting for her. "Where were you?" "At his place." You know who he is?" "Yes." "He's a man who has himself under control, and you can't even hear yourself." It hurt, even for her mother who considered herself strong. That night, Mia heard her mother crying, not sobbing like in the movies. She was muffling the sounds with a pillow, like adults who are always ashamed of their weakness. In the morning, her mother silently placed a cup of tea in front of her. "No sugar. You like it that way." Mia nodded. And for the first time, truly, she hugged her, without words. Because in this house, someone was finally listening. The city woke up at 7 in the morning, as always, with the coughing of old people, the barking of dogs, and the deafening buses that groaned menacingly as they pulled out onto their routes. No one knew that this day would enter someone's life as a full stop, or as an exclamation mark, depending on who you ask. There was a chair on the porch of Garrett's house, empty, but not forgotten. On it was a folded jacket, a thermos, and a note held down with a stone. On the paper, in neat, dry handwriting, "Sometimes a single thank you is worth more than 1,000 orders. I've gone. Because if not us, then who? If I don't come back, don't say anything. That will be louder than anything else." Mia found the note first. She came out of habit, morning, tea, thermos. But instead of the old man, there was an emptiness that couldn't be explained. She read the words for a long time. She reread them. Her lips moved as if they were trying to understand what to do now. The neighbors began to come out. First, a woman in a bathrobe, then an old man with a newspaper. Then a teenager chewing a sandwich, and everyone, one after another, looked at her as if she were holding something dangerous in her hands. "Were you with him?" one asked. She didn't answer. "Did they take him away? Or did he escape?" She remained silent, and then they came. Soldiers. Only now they weren't hiding. They were in uniform, with insignia, with documents, with carbines slung over their shoulders. 5 of them. One had a tablet, another had a camera. They stopped at the gate. A crowd gathered instantly. Some people took out their phones. Some whispered nervously, "I told you he was strange." One of the soldiers approached the girl. "Are you Mia?" She nodded. "Did you bring him tea?" "Yes." He crouched down, slowly, not like an interrogation, but like a man who didn't want to be taller than her. "Did he talk to you? About who he was?" "No," she replied. He told you who he didn't become. The soldier exhaled, tired, an old look, not for his age. We didn't come for him. We came to say thank you. On behalf of those who survived, on behalf of those who left, and on behalf of those who, like you, know how to listen. He won't come back? We don't know. Then I'll wait. Just wait. And she sat down on the porch. She put the thermos next to her. She sat up straight, just like he did. She looked at the street, just like he did. And that was everything. Loneliness, hope, silence. Not childish, real. The kind that adults have long forgotten. It rained for 3 days straight. Not a downpour, not a storm, just a slow gray whisper that made the walls of the houses smell damp and thoughts smell like memories. Mia still came, every morning, with a thermos. She left it on the steps and sat down next to it. She was silent. Sometimes her mother came with her. She just stood in the distance. No hysterics, no talking. She understood everything. Not because she forgave Garrett, but because for the first time in her life she saw her daughter holding on to someone not out of fear, but because there was a piece of herself in that person. On the 5th day, there was a short report on the radio. A high-ranking officer has resigned. His name has not been disclosed, but sources say it is related to an internal investigation into past operations in the conflict zone. It meant nothing to Mia. She didn't need titles or names. She just wanted someone to open the door again one day and say, "You're here. That means all is not lost." But no one came. A week later, she came back and found no chair. There was a box on the porch. Inside was his uniform, neatly folded. A photo. The same drawing with a caption added in different handwriting. "You taught me how to listen again." And in the envelope was a key. Attached to it was a note. "This is your home. If it ever gets too loud in your soul, it will hold you." Mia took everything in her hands, and she didn't cry. Because pain that has been lived through to the end no longer screams. It just becomes a part of you. 2 months passed. The post office delivered a strange postcard. No stamp. No return address. It had a picture of that same house, only not gray, but blue, with flowers in the window and children's shoes at the entrance. On the back was one word: alive. And that was all. If you've read this far, it means you know how to hear without words. Write the word "I'm listening" in the comments if you believe that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And subscribe. We don't speak loudly here, but we speak honestly.